Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Angela Kwashi from UN Capital Development Fund. I'll be your moderator for this afternoon. I'll please encourage everyone to mute as much as possible, and then also to cut off the video if you're not speaking. It will improve the quality of our session. Thank you very much. Please, let's give it just a few, 1 or 2 minutes, and we'll start.
Angela, I think you're on mute.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this maiden UN in Ghana Youth Impact Series. We had indicated that it will last for 60 minutes, but I would like to caution that it may go on to about 75 minutes, give or take. I will try as much as possible to be within time. I would like to set the scene for this series, and I would like to say that young people are a critical part of every country's population. In Ghana, for example, about a third of the population are 24 years or under. It's therefore important that during this COVID pandemic, no one is left behind. Please, for Ghana, for example, where we have recently experienced the lockdown, and similar things are happening in other countries to curb the spread of the virus. Young people, like everyone else, are facing increased unemployment, risk of sexual and gender-based violence, inability to access health services, halt in education all across. And then also, we also find that young people find it difficult to express these anxieties that they feel during this period, as evidence shows. So it is critical that the awareness and the needs of the young people are brought to the fore to facilitate and to curb the spread among peers and in their communities to minimize the negative impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. This is in view of this fact, the UN in Ghana is organizing a series of e-workshops called the Youth Impact Series to provide information to young people for them to be better informed and to build their capacity during the post-COVID period. So today's session is to launch this very important series called the Youth Impact Series. We have 5 personalities which I'll be introducing during the course of the time. We have in the persons of the UN Resident Coordinator, the acting UN Resident Coordinator, pardon me, the SG UN Youth Envoy, the AU Youth Envoy, sorry, a health worker, and a professional from UNFPA's headquarters. I would like to say that Ms. Sylvia Lopez, who is the RC, acting RC of the UN agencies in Ghana, I would like to give the floor to her because she has another engagement. And after her speech, I would come back and introduce the other speakers. So at this point, I would like to give the floor to Ms. Lopez Ekra. So Sylvia, if you could please take the floor and you can unmute yourself and give us the introductory remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Angela. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you can all hear me well. I am truly excited to be part of this event and to welcome you all very warmly to this first e-workshop organized by the UN Youth Group in Ghana. So today we're going to talk about the impact of COVID-19 on young people. And we are very privileged, as Angela said, to host two very powerful voices who speak for young people across the globe and on the African continent, the UN Youth Envoy Jayatma and the AU Youth Envoy Aya. And I have been in rooms listening to both of them speak before. And I can tell you one thing is that when they speak, everybody just listens. So this is something that you certainly do not want to miss. We also have some amazing young leaders from Ghana, including Youth Action Movement Ghana, Youth Leaders Fellows of the UN in Ghana, as well as many young persons from across the world. So you all very, very much welcome to this virtual discussion. When it comes to COVID, I think I don't need to say it. We all know it. We all living it. COVID-19 is really having a devastating effect on all of us around the world, including on young people. Even before the crisis, we had young people facing enormous challenges. 1 in every 5 young person was already not in education, nor in training or employment. There were also massive challenges with employment, inequalities, access to sexual and reproductive health, gender-based violence, and other socioeconomic challenges. Now, you add COVID to this, and these challenges have multiplied exponentially. Schools are closed in 192 countries around the world, which is affecting education and learning for over 1.5 billion learners. This is a huge number. Jobs are being lost, and the most vulnerable jobs, and we know that this is where we very often find young people, are among the worst affected. So young people are feeling the impact of COVID-19 very acutely from, as I said before, lost jobs, to family stress, to mental health and other hardships. Yet, despite all these obstacles and all these hurdles, and despite the risks, we see young people are still finding ways to engage, to support each other, to support their communities, and to demand and drive change. But the question that I would like to put on the table today is really if we are giving them space. And I think depending on where you sit, you could say no or a little, but I think none of us can really say a big resounding yes, because giving the space to young people is still not a reality, at least not everywhere. Participation opportunities continue to remain inadequate. We know that we continue to struggle, and you young people continue to struggle to get a seat at the table or to have your voice heard. And I think for those of you who have seen me or who have seen me, the UNFPA representative, I think on our good days, we could pass for young people, and we see how we are treated when we are not addressed based on our status, but based on the idea that we are young people. So it gives us a sense of how difficult it might be for all of you, and probably that's the reason why both him and I are so passionate about this. So what we really need to have is this global mental shift. We need to start seeing young people as full members of our society and as powerful agents for change. And in the context of COVID, as very highly effective partners in the COVID-19 response. And for that to happen, we need to engage and we need to listen. So consultations like the one that we are having today are important because this is how we can leverage and enable that potential. So we must really continue to create intentional spaces for listening and amplifying youth voices. It shouldn't be that usual ticking the box exercise where adults are coming and we speak endlessly and then we say that we have come to listen. And on that, you really have to teach us and push us and force us to do much better. We should also not come with solutions and tell young people, I think this is what you need. We should co-design and co-create the COVID-19 response with young people. This would be the ideal scenario, and it would be beneficial for all of us, because let us be very clear, we really cannot afford a lost generation of youth simply because we haven't been able to listen and to empower them. So from here, where do we want to go? We must emerge on the other side of COVID with a better world. This is the aspiration, for all of us. So we need to recover and we need to build back better. But to do that, we need to massively increase our investment in young people. We badly need your innovation, your energy, and your optimism if we are to transform and reshape our societies. We, the adults, very often we do things too slowly. And with COVID-19, this is no longer an option. So 2 final things that I would like to say so I don't fall into the trap of talking too much instead of listening. First, I want to really take the time to commend UNFPA in Ghana, and I cannot commend them enough for initiating this and creating this virtual platform. Let us nurture this baby and make sure that it works for all youth, including marginalized adolescents of different ages, girls, youth with disabilities, youth in the rural areas, youth in the slums, really all youth. So let's be creative and think outside of the box to make that happen. The second, and this will be my final comment, is that I want you all to stay safe, okay? It is amazing that children and youth seem to be less affected, but you are still at risk of contracting and transmitting the virus. So please protect yourself, social distance, wash your hands, and respect all the preventive measures. We need you in good health so that you can continue all the fantastic work that you are doing, as well as the fantastic work that you are planning to do. So get energized and empowered by this opportunity that is given to you today with the launch of this e-workshop series. Take advantage of it, strengthen your capacity. And I'm really amazed because I have seen in the chat room, people are logged from the Czech Republic, from Togo, from Nigeria, from Cameroon. So it's not just Ghana, it's really a global conversation, and I'm super excited by this. So all I can say is enjoy the series and continue to do your magic in your communities. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much, Sylvia, for that dynamic speech. And I might say that we have over 200 participants and it's rising. And one important thing I picked up from your speech was that aside the socioeconomic challenges, and then we are adding the COVID pandemic that exacerbates the already existing challenges. And it is important to create the space for the youth to feel inclusive and for us to also think outside of the box. Thank you so much. Participants, at this point, Ms. Ekra would be leaving us at some point because she has another engagement. So Silva, thank you very much. We'll continue with the SG's UN envoy, Ms. Jayathma Wikramanayake. So she was appointed by the UN Secretary General's Envoy on Youth in June 2017, and she's working towards making the UN a home to the youth of the world. She couldn't join us, but she sent us a video where we are going to play that video now. I will entreat you all to listen to it. Thank you very much.
Hello everyone, I hope all of you are safe and well and are coping with the COVID-19 pandemic and this new reality it has brought on all of us. My name is Jayathma Wikramanayake. I am the United Nations Secretary General's Envoy on Youth. Thank you very much for this invitation to speak to you today through a video message. First, I would like to convey my sincere congratulations, especially to the United Nations Interagency Group on Youth in Ghana for initiating this impressive series of e-workshops under the title The Youth Impact Series. 2 years ago, I visited Ghana just as I was beginning to serve in my role as the Youth Envoy, and I still remember the warmth and hospitality in which you welcomed me in your beautiful country. During my visit, I enjoyed the enriching discussions we had about the importance of meaningful engagement of Ghana's youth in decision making as active citizens and valuable sources of knowledge, ideas, innovation, and solutions to drive the improvement of lives of people in Ghana. I'm particularly glad to know that those discussions have led to concrete actions and they are becoming a reality. Shortly after my visit to Ghana, the United Nations saw the birth of its first ever youth strategy, Youth 2030, which was launched by the Secretary General in September 2018. Today, we are working together within the UN system, with governments and with young people themselves towards the implementation of the ambitious priorities outlined in this strategy. And I'm especially happy that Ghana is at the forefront of these efforts as one of the 10 countries who are fast-tracking the implementation of the Youth 2030 strategy at the country level. This series of workshops is a fantastic way of ensuring continuity of efforts amidst the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic that we are all challenged with. This global crisis is affecting everyone regardless of age, gender, wealth, identity and ability, because while some are at higher risk of developing severe illness due to coronavirus infection, others are experiencing the indirect impacts of the virus. I'm thinking of the countless young entrepreneurs and workers who have lost their jobs and income, the 1.5 billion students who cannot go to schools, to universities and access quality education, thousands of girls and young women who are targets of sexual and gender-based violence and domestic violence, young migrants, young refugees whose access to services, social protection, shelter is largely impacted by the pandemic, and young people with disabilities, LGBTQI young people who are facing stronger marginalization and exclusion. It's our role right now to do everything possible, including with advocating governments and decision makers, to ensure that the negative effects of COVID-19 on young people are mitigated and young people are empowered as equal partners to play their crucial role in rebuilding our lives and our societies in a sustainable and inclusive manner. Young people once more have shown their resilience and readiness to support members of their communities, their health systems every single day during this pandemic by being at the forefront and being volunteers, essential staff and experts. We will probably live the consequences of this crisis for a long time. So this workshop series couldn't be more timely. You should absolutely take full advantage of it to build your capacity and to be ready for the world post-COVID-19. With an eye to the future, as Ghana approaches its election year, young people must play their role to ensure free, fair and safe elections. I'm certain you will play your part in the political process so that more young Ghanaians can be elected into office, as it should be, really making a leap towards looking forward in the country's pathway towards sustainable development. Even during and after the COVID-19 pandemic, young people must be meaningfully involved and take their place, their rightful place, in the path that Ghana is taking towards building a prosperous and sustainable nation for everyone. Without young people, this won't be possible.
Wow, what's a powerful speech from the SG UN envoy. One thing that I take from that is that young people are resilient and they need to take their rightful place. At this moment, I would like to encourage all to leave their comments, questions in the chat room, and we'll ensure that it is read when it's time for questions and answers. We are moving on to the next speaker, who is Ms. Aya Chebi. She is the African Union Youth Envoy, the first ever African Youth Special Envoy on Youth and the youngest diplomat, and I'm proud to say, at the African Union Commission Chairperson's Cabinet. Ms. Chebi, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me very well? Yes?
Yes, yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. much. Hello, everyone. I want to first thank you again for the invitation and congratulations on the launch of this series. I want to thank particularly Ms. Lopez, the UN Resident Coordinator in Ghana, Mr. Ojalapi, the UNFPA Resident Representative, Mr. Tete, the CEO of National Youth Authority, and every young person who contributed to making this reality. It's a pleasure to be here, and I will share a bit what we've been doing at the African Union and what I think the challenges for young people are, as I was asked to also share some of the challenges. And maybe just to provide the latest stats on today's morning from Africa CDC for what's happening in Africa. We have more than 51,000 cases so far on the continent. We have over 2,000 deaths and over 17,000 recoveries. But unfortunately, this data is not segregated by age in Africa, and there is some data segregated by gender, but I think we still can do much better on data and even the collection of data, because these numbers might not really reflect the actual cases, because we also still trying to expand on the testing and tracing. So in terms of challenges, I think there are many, and young people have been really impacted by the pandemic, but I will mention just 4 coming out of conversations we've been having with youth the past few weeks. The first one is the intersectionality of issues of young people, because people think youth have 1, 2, 3 challenges, and if we fix them, then we're addressing it. But young people are saying that COVID-19 doesn't really stop the peace building work that they need to do. COVID-19 doesn't stop the co-infection of other diseases like malaria and HIV. COVID-19 doesn't stop the Ebola, which we had the outbreak for a couple of years and we still are dealing with Ebola. It doesn't also stop the plight of refugees, IDPs, youth with disability. It actually worsened these situations. So some young people would say, we may die of hunger or malnutrition and not COVID-19, or it's the same for me to die in the Mediterranean or to join a violent extremist group or to die with coronavirus, because I do not enjoy anyway basic human rights as a young person. So this is just to say that the complexity in Africa in handling the pandemic is in the existing issues that we are struggling with and we are dealing with, the weak infrastructure that we have, and other issues of inequality and development and layers of marginalization that young people go through. So this is not just a health crisis for us, it's a governance crisis. And youth before the pandemic were on the streets challenging the status quo and protesting governance and asking and demanding for reforms for the last decade. So it doesn't really help African youth when all the resources are, especially with donors, are redirected towards COVID-19 in one linear way without tackling the existing issues, without continuing to support the work that has been done for years by youth, especially led organization. So from this first challenge, I think we just need to continue to support Africa's infrastructure as key for post-pandemic transformation. The second challenge is youth unemployment and informal sector. There is no young person on the continent who would not mention youth unemployment. Before the pandemic, the share of unemployed youth among the total unemployed was as high as 60% in some countries. African economies generate only 3 million formal jobs annually for an estimated 12 million youth entering the workforce every year. And this is before coronavirus outbreak. So African youth remain in the informal sector, which means during these lockdowns and homestays, they hustle and survive on insecure jobs. And now that does not exist, so they are unemployed. So the socioeconomic impact is enormous. And it needs a lot of attention, not only to analyze it, but really to provide concrete solutions. Because all the subsidies that I'm seeing put in place and measures by government, whether regional or national, are not favoring informal sector and yet approximately 60% of jobs in Africa are considered vulnerable. So many youth cannot even bear the minimum wage to be tax compliant, and we need packages that look at youth in informal sector and micro enterprises and move us from this economic empowerment narrative to really economic resilience, where our youth are and how can we make that resilient instead of trying to bring them to the formal sector. So a lot of things can happen in that direction: provision of capital, digitalization of the market, educating on e-marketing, on different skills that is needed to cope with the current circumstances. The third, I would say, a big challenge is for young women. Gender-based violence, for example, is very much linked to economic impact. So we cannot control GBV if young women are not economically empowered, because this makes them vulnerable to power dynamics. They're offered food or care only to abuse them, and women are being forced to be in lockdown with their abusers with no access to assistance and legal protection, especially because the laws and policies that we have on protecting women and girls do not apply to lockdown. This is a new reality. We see increase in child marriage. We see women organizations, especially young women organizations on the front line who used to offer psychological and social assistance, are overwhelmed with work. They lack capacity, they lack funding, they lack shelters and facilities to make their work possible to do it. And then the issue of access to contraceptive, access to sanitary pads, the pre-existing conditions of HIV/AIDS are now people with pre-existing condition cannot access the ARVs, and young women and girls with disability and refugee and IDP also are struggling. So I think we just should not, again, this is a pre-pandemic are issues, but now they're becoming even more vulnerable in this circumstances and situation, and let alone the women and young women and girls in conflict situations like Libya, who have no assistance so far and no attention to their needs. The fourth and last challenge, I would say, is the digital divide. We know that 70% of Africa's population is offline. More than 40% of the world population is offline. So when people say education is disrupted, go and have education online, we're like, in Africa, how does that even possible when you do not have internet, or if you do, it's extremely expensive. And so I think we need to close the digital divide. We've been calling for this for decades, and for the responsibility of private sector especially, and of government to facilitate that. But I think this is the time that shows only those who are online are privileged to have access to this kind of platforms, or to training, or to opportunities. But the others who are not, who are out of the digital revolution, their education is disrupted and communication is disrupted. So I think the call to action from this challenge is to expand the supply chains and to support people who do not have access to technology, and align technology with the social impact. Now I'll move quickly, I hope I'm on time, but I'll move quickly to the focus on youth and what we're trying to do with the African Union to provide spaces, like Ms. Lopez said in her opening remarks. So we're trying to really build platforms and opportunities. Is crucial for us at the African Union to focus on youth. So we launched a couple of initiatives the last few weeks, focusing on 3 phases of the pandemic. The first phase is the preventive phase. So we've been convening since 23rd of March, the virtual AU Youth Consultation Series on COVID-19 for a collective youth response with Africa CDC. And for those who don't know, Africa CDC is the leading institution on the pandemic at the African Union that was established since 2017 and has been dealing with Ebola outbreak, and now is leading continental efforts on coronavirus outbreak. So these consultations are a series of online discussions. We completed the 12th round, so we convened 300 youth leaders from 40 countries. It's intimate conversation, so each group will have 20 to 25 activists, feminists, young leaders who set the tone for the youth perspective on the pandemic and discuss economic, social, and mental challenges. And now young people are actually self-organizing and hosting these consultations in different different languages with our support. So I'm really excited to see that happening and to see it become a movement of youth who are self-organized. We also turn these consultations to public webinars with decision makers to empower youth with information and bring them closer to interact with decision makers, which was their demand. So we were only just responding to what they're asking us to do, to be that bridge. So we hosted the Africa CDC director, we hosted Commissioner of Social Affairs yesterday, we did the session in Arabic, we hosted the chairperson of the African Commission on Human Rights, because we had so much demand on how are human rights respected in our countries and why we have all these violations. And then the second phase is the responsive phase. So we launched yesterday with Commissioner of Social Affairs and Commissioner of HRST in collaboration with Africa CDC, what we call the African Youth Front on Coronavirus, which is a multi-stakeholder advocacy group of youth networks that will engage in decision-making and really give a seat at the table. You know, I heard Ms. Lopez talking about tokenism and ticking boxes, so we want to move away from that and really have youth-led solution at the heart of supporting the implementation of the continental joint strategy, reporting directly to the Africa Task Force of Ministers and to Africa CDC. This will make actually the African Union the first intergovernmental institution in the world to create a high-level policy and advocacy framework for youth to co-lead the response on the pandemic. So I really call on all the youth following us from Ghana and all over Africa to get engaged with us on this continental mobilization and continue to show Africa's leadership despite skepticism of the world that Africa is unable to handle COVID-19 and always in need of foreign assistance, you know, but Africa needs solidarity. And I think this is the time for the world to learn from Africa because we are showing that kind of leadership. And then the last phase is the post-coronavirus transformation. So on that phase, we launched 2 initiatives. One is called the African Youth Charter Hustlers. We know that we have one of the most progressive documents on youth in Africa, the African Youth Charter, adopted in 2006. And now we're just trying to create or put youth at the center of post-COVID needs and reform of service delivery, including improvement of health infrastructure and dealing with other pandemics, because this is not the first and won't be the last, but we need to manage these pandemics better. And so this initiative will provide an opportunity for youth-led advocacy and youth-led accountability. We closed the deadline just last week, and we will select 2 youth from each country to be trained in advocacy to hold their governments accountable and to participate in the transformation of governance and African institutions. And then the last one I'll mention here is the African Youth in Public Service project, advocating for more youth in public service. We see that from this pandemic making, we see it now happening when, national authorities are not engaging young scientists, young health workers, young tech gurus, which we see the need for them now, especially with the need of digitalization. And so we think that promoting more and putting youth central to be in public service, attracting more youth in public service is important. So we hosted, beginning of this week, Monday and Tuesday, a workshop building community of peer learning and best practices, and brought together the youngest ministers on the continent and policymakers and parliamentarians to really attract more youth into politics, basically. And we know that this should address also the generation gap, because the average age of African leadership is 64 and the average age of the continent is 20. And so we have an absurd generation gap of 40 years, which is a gap in understanding the problem and dealing with it. So I also would like, through this initiative, to call on youth to get more engaged in public service and in politics, in government, in local councils. We need to occupy these spaces to be able to reform these institutions to work for us when these kind of crises happen. So I hope all these platforms are unifying and supporting African youth. We're trying to play our part and ensure that no one is left behind, especially the most vulnerable. And I would just say that we just need to do that, to play our part and work together and unify and mobilize. We have the power of demography, we have the innovation, creativity. We're the coolest generation. I don't see why we are not the ones on the front line leading the solution. But I think in this critical time, we need to join hands, especially with our leaders and governments, and co-lead with them and guide them on how to do things, how to communicate to our constituency, and how to make sure that we get out of this stronger. So we are the ones to save our continent. That would be my message to my peers in this call. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Aya, for that speech. And it's been very energetic, and I felt the power in there. And we are grateful that the AU is taking action. And the three initiatives that you mentioned, it creates that space that Sylvia did mention, to create the space needed for the youth to participate fully. Thank you so much. I would like to say that we are, the participants in this session is hitting 500. We are also on YouTube streaming live this particular session. Aya, thank you so much. Thank you very much. I would like to say that we should all be putting our questions in the chat room. There'll be ample time for us to read your questions and then ensure that they are answered as much as possible. Thank you so much. At this point, we'd like to move on to the next speaker, who is Mr. Caesar Kaba. Now, Mr. Caesar Kaba is a dynamic young person from the Youth Action Movement, that is of the Planned Parenthood Association of Ghana. He's a passionate advocate and a health worker. Thank you so much. Can you please take the floor and give us your speech?
Thank you very much, and hello to all the young people across the globe who have joined us today. I must say that before I say anything, the uniformity in the voices of Sylvia, Angela, and Aya truly show that African and global youth really understand problems we face, because I feel they've said almost everything I plan to say, but I'll be more local with my presentation as much as possible. I'm here to speak to you about the practical experiences that young people face in Ghana with regards to COVID-19. And before I move ahead, I want to state the obvious, that we know from the youthful nature of our continent and the youthful nature of our country, if we are told that 39% of Ghanaian population is between the ages of 15 and 35, then we cannot examine any phenomena without truly looking at its impact on young people, and exactly the reason why we are here today. Today, I'll be looking across three major areas that I feel are very important in this pandemic, which is the health and well-being of young people, access to quality education, and unemployment and the livelihood of young people. To start, we have to appreciate that COVID-19 has not really presented with some entirely new issues like we've already had. The problems we are facing as young people are problems that already existed before COVID. And so health and well-being in the aspect of access to SRHR information was already low. We had people's conservative ideas and beliefs limiting young people from these services and information. We had the implications of all of that. We saw HIV infection rising among young people, teenage pregnancy in Ghana, about 14%. And we were told that about 53% of all pregnancies in Ghana were already unintended before COVID-19. And we had a data that 30% of all women and 23.1% of all men were already experiencing gender-based violence in different areas in their lives. And we know mental health situation in Ghana was already an issue. And so when COVID-19 came, if you look through the impact of COVID on the health and well-being of young people, you have to talk about the limited access to healthcare, especially in lockdown areas when we experienced that partial lockdown in Ghana, where young people are not given exemptions to attend a health facility for minor ailments and other services. They were told to call when they need any care. And we know reproductive health and other minor ailments are not emergency issues. And so they were really left behind on that. Let me cite an example of a young lady I counseled 2 days ago. And the results of that counseling showed that she was likely to have been infected with an STI. So they referred health clinic even after the pass lifted. And she told me clearly that she wouldn't attend the clinic. And her reason was that the healthcare facilities have become hotspots, and she cannot expose herself to the infection when she goes there. And so that was the main reason why she rejected the referral to attend the clinic. And that is just a clear indication that health-seeking behavior of young people in Ghana and across the globe has been affected by this pandemic that we are touting as a killer disease and a killer virus and all of that. It has been mentioned already that people around the globe are more exposed to SGBV, and that includes Ghanaian youth. We know from the literature that a lot of young people and a lot of victims of SGBV received this from perpetrators who are close relatives of theirs. What it means is that if we relocate young people from their institutions, from their workplaces to their homes, then you are exposing them to more risk, because the literature clearly suggests so. And so things have to be kept in place to support young people in this area, and let me say every individual. And there's a prediction of a rise in unintended pregnancies. As I mentioned already, these were high in Ghana already. And if we are now telling people to stay idle and with people in their homes, that we are predicting SGBV issues and limited access to contraceptives and all of that, then we cannot ignore the fact that there will be a possible rise in unintended pregnancies when all of this is over. HIV infection and all of these things cannot be forgotten. But one aspect that has been neglected, in my view, is the mental health implication of COVID-19. I and some other few people in this call I know were part of a group of young people that attended an engagement just before the first case of COVID-19 was confirmed in Ghana. We were confirmed as contact people of COVID-19. And we're supposed to self-isolate for 14 days. And I can testify from my own experience that it was a mental and psychological battle, because having to stay in a room for 24 hours alone and being treated as if we were infected already wasn't any easy thing to go through. And so these things have to be reconsidered as we talk about the health and well-being of young people in COVID-19 era. Another thing I want to highlight is access to quality education. Before COVID, we knew it was limited: infrastructure, learning material, and all of that. But one specific thing that is more annoying to me, and I guess other young people, is the issue of sanitary pads and sanitary conditions in school. We know in Ghana, there are several young girls who are denied the opportunity to go to school just because they have to stay away from school in the period of menstruation, just because they cannot afford a sanitary pad to use. And annoyingly, we have about 20% luxury tax on sanitary pad. Luxury tax, as we know, is on wine and other things that are supposed to be of luxury. How the government of Ghana over the years has considered sanitary pad as a luxury product is something we are still yet to receive answers on. And I think it's about time young people come together to demand a deduction of the prices of this sanitary pads. Let me talk about limited access to ICT infrastructure in Ghana. As it has been mentioned by Aya already, we know when we talk about e-learning in these days, people are supposed to just a limited number of young people have access to ICT. Have that infrastructure and able to even engage their lecturers and supervisors on regular basis on this e-platforms to learn and to engage themselves in these activities. And so it's a real big barrier. But another thing we forget also is people living with disability. I have a mentee somewhere in a village who is in a special school. She's deaf and dumb. And I'm asking myself in this period that people are engaged in virtual learning. What becomes of special people like that are supposed to also have a platform which is lacking to engage themselves in learning? And what becomes of them if COVID-19 is extended up to December? Obviously, about half of their years will be wiped away because of COVID-19. And so we cannot leave behind rural kids and people living with disability as we discuss these issues. The issue of unemployment cannot be left out. And I want to speak directly about the implications we've seen in Ghana. In my work, and I guess a lot of you have experienced this, there's a lot of transactional sex in Ghana today, because people cannot afford daily living. They are offered to other people by their parents or they themselves just to get something to feed themselves. Crime rates among young people, I think, can be directly linked to their unemployment state because they lack anything to do. And we've seen political manipulation. And I'm even afraid going into the 2020 election that the issue of political vigilantism that we saw, that young people are used to fight and they are armed to hurt other people in Ghana, can even rise because of all of this. And we cannot do without discussing this. And so when we begin to see layoffs and issues of job security in COVID-19, it becomes more alarming, because just 2 weeks ago, a friend of mine was laid off from his work because the company cannot keep running because of COVID-19. That is not an isolated case. Obviously, a lot of people are experiencing these things in their daily lives, and it's going to be, it will take time for us to really quantify the effects of COVID-19 in this area. There are collapsed startups that we've seen, limited access to market. National service was postponed or paused for about a month, and we don't know what will happen if the cases that we are seeing keep rising. There may be a freeze in unemployment if COVID-19 damages a lot of companies and government. And so of KIAs or headquarters that we know of. These people have over the years been suffering in their own desire or trying to get a living out of the economy that is obviously hard. And so they keep carrying load and all of those things. And so COVID. So in brief, all I've been saying is that young people at home have been made to either choose between safety and their livelihood, because they cannot afford to feed themselves in their homes if they stay, and they cannot protect themselves when they go out to try and search for a living. And so because of that, it's a dilemma between choosing safety and choosing to go and fight for money and other things to try and buy your own basic necessities. The misinformation about COVID-19 is having diverse effects on young people. I've seen people using alcohol to wash their hands just because they think alcohol itself that they drink, beer and those things can prevent COVID-19. We have to reach out to more young people with information about this, because there's a lot of misinformation in the system. And the mental health implication of COVID-19 cannot be left out, that people, per their confrontation with the virus, have to deal with a lot of implications with this. And there's a reduction in health-seeking behavior, as I mentioned, limited access to SRHR, and all of that we are dealing with. For the young people who are dealing with the virus in the front line, let me make a special mention of rotation nurses, the contact tracing team, which we are told that was engaged from unemployed young people in this country that are not being paid well, from my own judgment. And the security forces that has a lot of young people in them who are enforcing laws. The media, who is going a lot, is moving across this country to give us stories of COVID-19. And the innovators that I cannot leave out, that we've seen people innovating, especially even the automated hand washing machines. All of these people are young people, but unfortunately, we've received limited support for them to upscale and make their businesses thrive in this period. So we have to also continue to talk to the government to provide adequate PPEs for these people. I know nurses, rotation nurses currently have worked up to 8 months without receiving any allowance. What are they supposed to do without any money to take care of themselves in this situation? Government has to respond to their plight. We have to talk about the stimulus packages that young people have been cut off.
Could you just wrap up for me for just in the next 1 minute or two, please?
Yes, I will do that. Time. So ridiculously, I have to mention that contact tracing teams are not part of the frontline definition we've seen, and they are left out in terms of insurance and all of these things. This is injustice, and we have to come together to talk for our young people. And so in conclusion, I know COVID-19 is worsening our plight as young people in Ghana, And the full effects of the pandemic may not even be adequately measured until it is over. And we have to be mindful of that. But in all of these, we've seen young people demonstrating leadership in different spheres of life, producing gadgets and all of that, and reaching out to other young people. And we have to say ayuko to all of us for being resilient, as Aya said, and continue to work to prevent COVID-19 from killing our generation.
Thank you, Caesar. I can see that you're passionate about your cause. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. And we thank you for localizing the pandemic and, you know, merging it with and trying to mix it with all the challenges, the socioeconomic challenges that we are facing in Ghana. Thank you so much. I would like to tell the participants that we do have some hashtags which I have put in the chat room, and they are youth impacts, hashtag youth impact series, hashtag put young people first, hashtag for the good of Ghana. Please use this when you're tweeting and creating discussions about the session online. Thank you very much for your support. At this point, we have a special video we would like to show you. So please sit back and enjoy.
From here at United Nations, I join you in welcoming the new year. We enter 2020 with uncertainty and insecurity all around. Persistent inequality and rising hatred, a warring world and a warming planet. Climate change is not only a long-term problem, but a clear and present danger, and we cannot afford to be the generation that fiddled while the planet burned. But there is also hope. This year, my New Year's message is to the greatest source of that hope, the world's young people. From climate action to gender equality to social justice and human rights, your generation is on the front lines and in the headlines. I'm inspired by your passion and determination. You are rightly demanding a role in shaping the future, and I am with you. The United Nations stands with you and belongs to you. 2020 marks the 75th anniversary of the United Nations. We are launching a decade of action for the Sustainable Development Goals, our blueprint for a fair globalization. This year, the world needs young people to keep speaking up, keep thinking big, keep pushing boundaries, and keep up the pressure. I wish you peace and happiness in 2020. Thank you.
That was the Secretary General Guterres' message, and he put across a cause that is passionate and that is dear to his heart, climate change. And also he did mention the 75th anniversary that we are celebrating this year of the UN. So at this point in time, we've come to the last speaker, I would say the last but not the least. And she is in the person of Irem Tuma. She is the UNFPA HQ focal point for youth leadership and participation. Irem, please, you may take the floor.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, clear.
Let me just put on my presentation. Hi, everyone. I think you can see my presentation. And if you pin my video, you'll be able to see the other visuals that I'm going to talk about. So firstly, hello, my name is Irem Tuma, and I am connecting to you from New York today, where I work at the UNFPA headquarters on youth leadership and participation. And I'm really honored by this invitation and really enriched by all of the previous speakers and all the perspectives that you shared. I just want to talk a little bit about our ongoing campaign, Youth Against COVID-19, during this webinar. But before I get started on that, maybe just a few top line messages about why you are so important in the response to the pandemic. So this is a moment that requires solidarity and rapid action by all of us, no matter how old we are or where we live in the world. And since the beginning of the pandemic, I've had the privilege to work with a lot of UNFPA offices and inspiring young people all around the world. And I really see how this action is being driven by young people and the solidarity is being shown. So this is really inspiring. And in general, after all these conversations, you might be thinking, but what is the concrete role that we can play in the response to COVID-19? And I think something that is really important is for all of you to take the necessary precautions, disseminate accurate information, and also mobilize in your communities. Especially sharing accurate information and leading by example is something that can save lives or help rebuild your communities in these days. So I think that is something that I particularly want to stress. And I know that many of you might be experiencing a lockdown where you are. I've been in my home for almost 6 weeks now. There are no flights back to Turkey where I come from. And it might be something that is difficult in terms of your mental health, in terms of your socioeconomic consequences, and we fully see that. But I just also want to stress that you can support the response and make a difference from your home. Many of you being on this webinar is a sign that you are already engaged, you're already organized, you're already interested. Keep on being that way and be resourceful and engaged in the response to this pandemic, but also when the societies are being rebuilt. As the UN system and as the UNFPA, we are with young people. We trust in you and we're here to support you. And I think all my colleagues from UNFPA Ghana and also all the other UNFPA country offices in Africa are the ones that you can reach out to for more specific information on how to do that. So today I actually am here to talk to you a little bit about the campaign that we have called Youth Against COVID-19. And we have already had a lot of participation from especially West Africa in this campaign. And I wanted to make a call for you to join the conversation that we have online about the ways that young people are affected by COVID and also how they can take action. So let me tell you a little bit about this. So this is a partnership between UNFPA and Prezi, which is a technology company. But even more importantly, we have a lot of youth partners that have been working with us on the campaign to help us develop what the key messages for young people are and really reflect the needs of adolescents and young people around the world. And so far, we have had 6 different video episodes that have focused on different topics on COVID. And I just want to also take a little explanation here. Youth Against COVID-19 is primarily a video campaign, but at the same time, we are very aware that not all young people are digitally connected or have access to laptops or cameras or the internet. So we're also rolling out Youth Against COVID-19 in very different formats like radio programs, podcasts, or just, one-to-one community communication where this is possible. So this is not just something that is for you if you're able to see a video or record a video, but it is very much certain key messages that we hope can be helpful in your efforts to reach out to your community. And I'll talk a little bit more about how to practically do that in a bit. And as I said, in Youth Against COVID-19 campaign, we are focusing on 6 different important aspects. One is about what COVID is, how to take the necessary precautions as advised by the World Health Organization, and how to really engage and educate your families and your peers on how to protect themselves. The second episode is about I am young, how will I be affected? And I think on this webinar and workshop, we've already heard a lot about how young people have been affected in many different ways, from their mental health to their employment opportunities to sexual and gender-based violence at home. And all of these things are things that we try to reflect in this episode. Our 2 other episodes were on sexual health and mental health during the pandemic. And the last 2 episodes were about young people taking action, where we showcased actions from all around the world, from a refugee camp in Uganda to Canada, just showing how young people have been resourceful in taking action. And in our last episode, we talked about how gender inequalities are really exacerbated in this pandemic. The reason why I want to really encourage you to take part in this campaign is because even if you see one video that has my face in it, you can just click one button on our website to go and record your own videos. So as you can see in this campaign, we have heard from people, young people around the world, many from Africa as well. And we have seen many translations to a lot of local languages in Africa and other places as well. So our call to action is for you to watch the videos that we have, but also if you have the ability, recreate these videos so that you can reflect your unique perspectives and your actions against the COVID-19 pandemic. So as you can see, you can be the one that is recording those videos. I would like to once again say that this is an interactive project, and this is just one of the ways in which UNFPA is trying to encourage participation and amplify young people's voices. We are really emphasizing risk communication and community engagement here. It is very much important for us to hear from you and your own perspectives, but what is equally important as we face this pandemic around the world is for you to educate yourself on what the right information is and to share it with your friends, with your families, and with your communities in whatever form they might be. So please be a part of this engagement. And also, it is possible to translate these videos. It is possible to recreate them. It is possible to share them on any different method of communication, whether it is radio, or whether it is text messages or community engagement, as long as it is safe. So please try to take these messages and disseminate them as you see fit. As I said, to do this offline use, if you are able to go to our website, you will see that the scripts for all of these videos are online, and they're just text messages that you can use. All these scripts have been developed in line with the guidance from the World Health Organization and with the input of dozens of youth organizations. So we really hope that these scripts can give you a starting point to really frame your key messages around COVID-19. As I said, you are able to also add your own points to these scripts and reflect the situation on the ground wherever you are. However, we really want to make sure that this is all scientifically accurate, evidence-based. So if you ever adapt the scripts, please try to make sure that this is in line with the guidance from your local health authorities and also your government. I just want to give our hashtags, so you can follow UNFPA Youth and UNFPA to get the latest updates on this particular campaign. And you can also visit our website on this link, unf.pa/YAC. I want to leave with the message that this Youth Against COVID-19 is just one of the multiple campaigns and initiatives that we are working on together with young people as UNFPA. But at the same time, maybe it is a concrete step that you can take. You can go and learn more about things or join the conversation. And if you want to learn more about what UNFPA is doing in your country, please do reach out to our UNFPA country offices. And we will continue to really support youth-led organizations and youth-led action in the pandemic, but also after these lockdowns are over. So thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm just putting here our accounts and our website once again. If you're able to do so, please consider visiting these resources. And I really hope that I'll be able to see a lot of videos from Ghana and all the other countries that are on the line in the upcoming weeks. Thank you so much. And I haven't been able to see the questions yet, but depending on time and if I get the chance to do so, I'm happy to respond to any questions. Keep safe, everyone.
Thank you, Iram. That was a very nice presentation from you. And we thank you for bringing to us the tools that UNFPA has in order to encourage participation, stimulate conversation, and then to ensure that we are promoting inclusivity. Thank you very much. At this point, we'd like to move on to questions. And I'll pose the questions to the speakers, and then we hope that they answer. But then I would like to point out that the AU envoy unfortunately had to leave. But then we are going to send her the questions, and then she will respond to them, and then we'll send you, or we'll give answers to your questions. So no question will be left unanswered. So at this point, I will just move on to Caesar. There was a question that what programs are in place to scale up various interventions in rural and hard to reach communities?
Okay.
And Caesar, before you answer that, I would like to say that the UN resident coordinator acting, Sylvia, said, well done in raising the sanitary pads issue, and they are not a luxury, and they are essential and should be subsidized. Well done, young man. I'm proud of you.
Thank you very much. So on the issue of scaling up these interventions to young people in rural areas, it's a shame to say that we have not seen too much of government intervention in this. Civil society and youth activists have done a lot in reaching out to young people in rural areas. Let me cite another example of young people that we've engaged recently. We engaged them last year, and there was a complaint that they do not have access to even textbooks that will aid their learning. And now these people have been told to sit at home when they initially depended only on notes that were given to them by their lecturers and teachers. And so these people in this lockdown period have been calling us to try and get books and even learn on their own, but they do not. That is just an example of how the situation of Ghanaian youth in rural areas is very, very bad. And we have to continue to speak out for them when we get a platform and say that government must enhance every intervention that is currently ongoing in this country and target rural kids and rural young people and people living with disability and other marginalized groups, because they are, we see them left out in a lot of interventions that we are seeing in Ghana. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Caesar. We really appreciate your answer. I would like to ask you one other question, if you will kindly indulge me. How do we as a people tackle the issue of the psychological effects of the COVID-19 on the average Ghanaian? Any clear points on what to do collaboratively? Something very nice and short.
Okay, thank you very much. And one thing is the understanding of COVID-19. It has been really poor in Ghana. So I cite the example of people who stigmatize health personnel who are working to combat COVID-19. That is clearly ignorance. Because if we look at dissemination of information in local dialects and local languages, it's really lacking in Ghana. So we have a lot of information on social media. We have English versions of information, but my language in Northern Ghana still lacks any. I had to do a Facebook Live, for instance, to provide people who speak my language. But I asked myself, if I do that for young people who understand English, how do I reach out to people who are not literate? So to me, if you ask me what we should do together, we have to work together to enhance education on COVID-19, because until we really understand COVID-19, we still see it as deadly as we see in the media. We hear only worse stories. When people record cases, Ghana records cases, the first you see on people's status is the number of cases that are recorded. You hardly see recoveries. We have to bring people to the understanding that COVID-19 is not a death sentence. And when you get it, you can survive. And we only have just few deaths in Ghana, even though it's unfortunate. And so it's about getting people to really understand what COVID-19 means and how to handle it, and the fact that it's not a death sentence. That is the way we can eliminate the mental aspect of the effects. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Caesar. Thank you very much. I have a question for Sylvia. There's a question here that says that what is UN doing for the increased number of unemployed graduates all over Africa? Is Sylvia with us in the session? Miss Lopez Ekra.
Sorry, Angela, I'm multitasking, but I think Ni is online, and I'm sure he would be more than happy to take it.
All right. Okay. All right. Thank you. I would like to introduce you to Mr. Edward Niyi Ujulape, who is the UNFPARR of Ghana. Mr. Niyi, please, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you very much, Angela. What's the question again? Sorry.
What is the UN doing in Ghana for the increased number of unemployed graduates and then all over Africa?
Okay, thank you very much. I think the UN is a development organization partnering with the entire government and every actor in the scene so that we can bring development to the entire country. And this goes from the issue of even food production to the issue of entrepreneurial training and also to energize the entire economy. It is when the entire economy is energized and there is a lot of resources going on there in different ways, that's when employment will come generally. So the UN is partnering with government in every phase. You know, government has many schemes which to generate employment. And so the UN is partnering with government to make sure that all that happens. And you will eventually see the results down the line when there are more jobs, when there are more factories, when there are more industries that are working in the country. Unfortunately, COVID-19 has not helped a lot because the economy has had to shrink a bit, but I can see that a lot is going on, and in a short while, we will begin to see the response. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nii. Please, if you don't mind staying on, there's another question which I think you'll be the best person to answer, and it's about, this is the question. I need more clarification on how COVID-19 increases SGBV cases.
That's a simple one. Thank you very much, Angela, and thank you to anyone who has that question. The fact is this, due to COVID-19, in order for us to battle COVID-19 and make sure that it ends in this cause, there is a request to everybody to stay as much as possible at home. When you stay at home, you are likely not to be able to get infected. And for those who are already infected, when they stay at home, that is when they are not mixing with people and they are practicing social distancing, they will not be able to infect others. So if most people stay at home, what happens? In data shown us before now that there is a lot normally when people are at home, there is a risk of domestic violence. It is because of the hours of staying at home which has increased. So you have more people staying at home for longer hours, you normally expect that the risk of domestic violence and sexual and gender-based violence will increase. And from what we have had all over the world, and I say this all over the world, in Europe, in Asia, and also in Africa, there has been more reports now that when people are staying at home, there are reports of more reports of domestic violence and sexual and gender-based violence, which has gone on from about 30% up to about 80% in certain cases that we have. So apart from the iteration that we get ourselves, there is also the real fact in terms of reporting. So small staying at home will lead to more sexual and gender-based violence. Over.
Thank you so much, Nii, for your comprehensive answer. I would like to tell the participant that this is a series that we will be airing. So please watch the space, and then we'll be bringing series as we move along, and then issues that couldn't be addressed in this particular session will be carried over, and we will make them known in the subsequent series. At this point, I would like to ask Mr. Nii to give us the vote of thanks, and then for us to close this session. Unfortunately, time is against us. I did mention from the beginning that it's going to be about 75 minutes, and we want to make that time. So Mr. Nii, please, over to you.
Thank you very much. My task is a very simple one. It is to thank everybody who has participated in today's meeting. And in doing that, let me just say let me thank first moderator who has done an excellent job. But very, very importantly, I want to thank every panelist who has participated in this, both resident coordinator, the AU Youth Envoy, who has articulated in very, very clear terms what is being done across all of Africa. And also, I also want to say a big thank you to Irene. After saying thank you to Irene, let me also recognize the message that was sent to us by the UN Youth Envoy. We appreciate that a lot. We'll be conveying the appreciation of the entire Ghanaian and young people to in due course. And very, very much importantly, I want to say thank you to Caesar, who has actually over-treated all of the issues that came in the course of his intervention. We're very, very grateful, but most important of all is the audience. It is because we have an audience that we have a panel. And that's why for everybody who has participated in today's meeting, we want to say thank you. And as Angela has indicated, we want to assure that this is just the launch, this is the beginning of the series. We're going to have specific series. We're going to have about 3 or 4 more of this conversation that will be targeting specific topics. For example, we need a conversation about how COVID-19 impacts upon sexual and reproductive health. We need a specific conversation that will look after the issue of maybe youth education, youth migration, food security, and everyone authority. So please keep it on. And I want to say finally, thank you very much, and end, if it is possible, with a message, with a message on domestic violence from our resident coordinator. I want to thank each and every one of us. Please, Ayiko.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Nii.
Yeah.
I would like to say that the presentations and the links to additional information will be shared with all participants. And then also there's the DOFSU link. There's a DOFSU link or the hotline for reporting cases of SGBV. And I would like to mention the number, which is 055 1000 900. I'll repeat it. The hotline for the SGBV is 055 1000 900. Now we do have a short message we would like to air.
The COVID-19 pandemic is causing incredible human suffering and devastation around the world. But there is one of its consequences that I believe we are not talking about often enough. And I'm thinking of violence against women. As the economic pressure, the social pressure, the fear increase, so will the plight of many women and girls victims of domestic violence. For most of us at the moment, staying at home means staying safe. But unfortunately, for many women, staying at home means staying trapped with an abusive partner, unable to have access to family and friends for help, unable to have access to law enforcement for support. But it doesn't need to be that way. For all of us in our communities, if we see something, we have to say something. You need to speak up. And for those women who are currently suffering, I want you to know that you are not alone. We hear you. We see you. I know it's not easy to make that phone call, but you can do it. Call DOFSU at 05500 and report any case of domestic violence. DOFSU, with support from the United Nations in Ghana, has established this hotline for you. Use it, stay safe, stay alive.
This message is brought to you by the United Nations Systems in Ghana, Ministry of Gender, Children and Social Protection, and the Domestic Violence and Victim Support Unit, DOFSU, of the Ghana Police Service.
Thank you very much. So just to end it all, I'd like to say that in these current times, I'm making a call to all of us to stay safe, wash your hands with soap and the running water, practice social distancing, and all other Ghana Health Service and WHO regulations that are being aired for us to stay safe. So be healthy, stay safe, goodbye, and see you in the next session. Thank you.